A poor student returned a billionaire's briefcase, then the company founder saw what was inside. The briefcase was worth more than everything 19-year-old Kian Mercer owned in his entire life. It was sitting alone on a stone bench outside the tallest glass building in the city, black leather shining beneath the warm afternoon sun. Inside were rare watches, old photographs, sealed documents, and a small velvet box containing something far more valuable than money. Kian could have walked away. No one would have known. He desperately needed the money. But when he picked up the briefcase and saw the name engraved beneath the handle, he made a decision that would change not only his life, but the life of the billionaire who had lost it. Before we continue, if you believe kindness, honesty, and second chances can change someone's life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Epic Story Hub for more emotional stories that remind us that good people still exist. It was a bright Tuesday afternoon, the kind of day when the city seemed too busy to notice anyone who was struggling. Cars moved slowly between towering office buildings, businessmen hurried along sidewalks with phones pressed against their ears, and sunlight reflected from hundreds of glass windows, making the streets look almost golden. Kian walked through that world carrying a worn blue backpack that had been repaired so many times that his mother jokingly called it the family heirloom. He was on his way home from college, where he had just received another warning from the administration. His tuition payment was overdue. If he could not pay by Friday, he would be removed from his final semester. For Kian, that wasn't just an academic problem. It was the end of a dream. He had grown up in a tiny apartment above an old bakery on the edge of the city. His mother, Mercer, worked long hours cleaning offices during the day and sewing clothes at night. His father had died when Kian was 12, leaving behind a mountain of unpaid bills and a sentence his mother never forgot: make sure the boy gets an education. Kian had carried those words with him ever since. He worked evenings unloading boxes at a grocery warehouse. He skipped meals when money was tight. He studied under the weak yellow light of their kitchen because the lamp in his bedroom had stopped working months ago. Yet somehow, he had remained one of the best students in his class. That afternoon, however, his courage was beginning to crack. He had exactly $23 in his pocket, and his mother's bank account had less than $30. His college demanded nearly $2,000 before Friday. As Kian passed the entrance of Veyron Holdings, he noticed something lying beside a stone planter. At first, he thought it was an ordinary briefcase. Then he saw that no one was nearby. He looked around. People were rushing past. Nobody noticed. Kian picked it up. It was heavy. The leather was expensive, the metal corners polished, and a small silver plate beneath the handle carried the initials AV. He placed the briefcase on the bench and hesitated. He knew what he should do. Hand it to security. Walk away. Forget about it. But then the thought came. $2,000. His tuition. His mother's overdue electricity bill. The medicine she had been cutting in half because she couldn't afford to buy another prescription. Kian's fingers tightened around the handle. For several seconds, he imagined what his life would look like if he simply disappeared into the crowd with that briefcase. Then he remembered his father's voice from years ago, telling him that being poor was never an excuse to become dishonest. Kian took a deep breath and carried the briefcase toward the building entrance. He was stopped almost immediately by security. The guards became nervous when they saw the case, especially after Kian explained where he had found it. One guard opened the case only enough to identify its owner, and both men stared in disbelief. Inside were several expensive watches, stacks of old documents, a sealed envelope, photographs, and a small velvet box. There was also a passport belonging to Augustus Vale, the founder and chairman of Veyron Holdings. The name was familiar to everyone. Augustus Vale was one of the richest men in the country, a self-made billionaire whose company controlled technology, real estate, and investment firms across several continents. Newspapers called him ruthless. Business magazines called him brilliant. Television hosts called him one of the most influential men in the world. But Kian didn't know any of that mattered. He only knew the briefcase wasn't his. Security contacted the executive office, and within minutes, the entire atmosphere inside the building changed. Employees hurried through the lobby. Someone whispered that the founder's personal briefcase had disappeared. Another person said that a priceless family heirloom was inside. A third person insisted the police should be called. Then the elevator doors opened. Augustus Vale stepped out. He was dressed in a dark gray three-piece suit, his hair perfectly combed, his expression serious. Yet there was something unusual about his face. He looked frightened. Not angry. Frightened. His eyes immediately found the briefcase. Then they moved to Kian. The billionaire walked closer and stared at the young man standing awkwardly in a faded jacket and worn jeans. Kian lowered his eyes and held out the case. Augustus took it with trembling hands. He opened it. Everything was there. The watches. The documents. The photographs. The velvet box. For a moment, the billionaire said nothing. Then he looked at Kian and asked why he had returned it. Kian simply explained that it wasn't his. Augustus studied him carefully, almost as if he was searching for a hidden motive. He asked Kian if he had opened the case. Kian admitted that security had opened it briefly, but he had not touched anything inside. Then Augustus noticed the boy's hands. There were small cuts across his fingers. His nails were rough. His jacket was faded from years of use. The backpack on his shoulders looked older than some of the employees standing nearby. The billionaire suddenly asked Kian what he did. Kian told him he was a university student. Augustus asked why he was carrying the briefcase himself instead of leaving it with security. Kian smiled faintly and said that sometimes poor people were the ones who understood the value of losing something. The words stayed with Augustus. He opened the velvet box. Inside was a simple silver pocket watch. It wasn't worth much compared with everything else in the case. But Augustus stared at it as if it were worth billions. The watch had belonged to his father. Years earlier, when Augustus was a young man with no money and no company, his father had given it to him before dying. It was the one possession he had never sold, never replaced, and never left behind. Except that day, he had almost lost it. Augustus looked at Kian again. Then something even stranger happened. He asked Kian what he needed. Kian immediately shook his head. He said he didn't want anything. Augustus asked again. Kian finally admitted that his tuition was overdue. But he quickly added that he wasn't asking for money. He would figure something out. That answer surprised everyone. Augustus could have simply written a check. Instead, he asked Kian to wait. He took him upstairs to a quiet conference room overlooking the city. There, Augustus learned about Kian's life. He learned about Maribel. He learned about the warehouse job. He learned about the scholarship Kian had nearly lost. And he learned that Kian had been offered a part-time internship months earlier but couldn't accept it because the company required transportation expenses he couldn't afford. Augustus listened without interrupting. Then he asked one question. What do you want to become? Kian looked out through the enormous glass window at the city below. He said he wanted to build affordable technology for ordinary people. Not luxury devices for billionaires, but tools that could help students, workers, and families who were always being told that progress was too expensive for them. For the first time that day, Augustus smiled. He told Kian that he had once dreamed exactly the same kind of dream. But somewhere along the way, he had become so focused on building a billion-dollar company that he had forgotten why he had started. The next morning, Kian received a phone call. His tuition had been paid anonymously. But that wasn't all. He had also been offered a paid internship at Veyron Holdings. Kian initially thought it was a mistake. It wasn't. For the next several months, he worked harder than anyone expected. He arrived before senior executives and stayed late after everyone left. He didn't ask for special treatment. He learned from engineers, accountants, designers, and managers. He made mistakes, apologized, learned, and tried again. Augustus watched quietly. And slowly, the billionaire began changing too. He started visiting the company's scholarship program. He began meeting students from poor neighborhoods. He increased funding for employee education. He even created a small foundation in his father's name. But Kian never forgot where he came from. Every Friday afternoon, he went home to the little apartment above the bakery. He still helped his mother with groceries. He still repaired broken appliances instead of replacing them. He still carried the same blue backpack. One afternoon, almost a year after the briefcase incident, Augustus visited Kian's home. Maribel opened the door and was stunned to see the billionaire standing in the hallway. Augustus handed her a small envelope. Inside was a photograph of Kian receiving an academic award and a letter announcing that he had been selected to lead a new technology initiative for underprivileged students. Maribel began crying. She told Augustus that she had no idea how to repay him. Augustus shook his head. He said she had already repaid him. She had raised a young man who had taught a billionaire something money never could. Honesty wasn't valuable because it made you rich. It was valuable because it allowed you to remain human when nobody was watching. Years later, Kian would become one of the youngest executives in Veyron Holdings. But he never forgot that sunny afternoon. The briefcase that could have changed his life overnight had instead changed it slowly, honestly, and permanently. And Augustus never forgot what he saw when he opened that briefcase and looked at the young man who had returned it. Not greed. Not ambition. Not desperation. He saw character. And sometimes, character is the greatest fortune a person can ever possess. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who believes that good choices still matter, and subscribe to Epic Story Hub so we can keep bringing you stories about hope, kindness, and second chances. And before you leave, comment the word honesty below if you believe that doing the right thing is still worth it, even when nobody is watching. Because Kian didn't become successful because he found a billionaire's briefcase. He became successful because, when life gave him the perfect opportunity to become someone else, he chose to remain himself. And sometimes, the smallest act of honesty can open a door that money never could.